Hello, hello, my dearest fishies. How are you today? I hope that you had a lovely day and some wonderful sleep, perhaps. Have you been remembering to drink water? Have you been taking care of yourself the past 24 hours? I missed you terribly so. I'm sorry, arsonist. Oop, jump scare. Congratulations to Dova on being first in chat today. Hello, Wood. Hello, Anxiety. Hello, Francis. Hello, ASMR Mans. Hello, James. Hello, Arsonist. Hello, Feifei. And we also have TikTok chatters. Welcome back to some of our TikTok chatters. Welcome, Titan. Welcome, Dogs. Thank you so much for being our TikTok mod. And Griffin, welcome back. You know, for a fish, it's kind of hard to forget to drink water. I mean, at least get some fresh water. Can't be salty all the time. Have to lurk because I'm fighting Dima for Doritos. You know, I would also fight Dima for the Doritos. And I think, surprisingly enough, I would win. And that's saying something. I can't even have Doritos anymore. Hi, Harukin. How are you today? Are you going to set everything on fire and cause problems? But, you know, in a loving, fun, goofy way. Hi, Talbot. Hey, Talbot. Did you see that that I started posting the VODs of reading For Her Sake on YouTube? If you'd like, I can send you the link. But those will post every other day-ish. There are some days that'll have like 2 days in between. Hi, Akira. I'm doing well today. How are you? Are you well rested? Or are you feeling sleepy because it's time to go to bed? I know that it's late for you, Akira. I was kind of drifting off and had my audio on max. I'm sorry. Am I too loud? Here, I can be quiet. Is this quiet enough? Hi, welcome to stream. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. No, come back. Okay. I don't mean to scare you. All right. Hello, my fishies. You're late. I mean, you didn't get first, no. And if that qualifies as being late, then I guess, yeah, you are late. You will be punished later. No. Look at Dima getting the Doritos. I'm horrible at socials, but I've subscribed. Oh, you don't have to subscribe. I was just curious if you wanted the link. For some reason my activity feed isn't working, but oh well, I guess. I want to see the releases. Okay. I will say they are marked for 18 plus. Just because I didn't want to have to, like, some videos are 18 plus, some videos aren't 18 plus, and then YouTube's policy on swearing, just like the quantity of swearing. I like your avatar, thank you. Hi Voodoo, welcome back, it's so good to see you. I've been waiting so long for this. It's only been 24 hours. What do you mean? Oh, and I almost forgot. I don't think anxiety got it, but the puzzle link. Yep, there it is. I'll pin that to the top of chat. It's 2:41 a.m. here. Yeah, like I said, it's really late for you, Akira. Are you going to go to sleep? Can I read you to sleep? Oh, sorry, TikTok chat. You're looking at the wrong part of screen. Here, this will fix that. Now you can at least see me. Alright, the next puzzle is up. I think it's a PG-13 chat today. Well, Twitch is PG-13. You are not allowed to be on Twitch if you are under 13 years old. Okay, got it? Yeah? It's just that some days our chat is 18 plus. Who wants to guess what flavor electrolytes I have right now? Mind you, this is my 3rd cup. There's nothing PG-13 about Steph's punishments. Yeah, but we don't need to give that away. Grape flavor. Nope. I did have that this morning though. Like first thing in the morning. I had grape. And I'll wait just a little bit for you guys to guess a little bit more. And then I'll give you the answer and then we'll start reading anyway. Bye, Titan. Does your cove have a microwave? Yeah. Here, I'll show you. It wasn't originally supposed to have a microwave, but the artist thought that that would be a good addition. You'll be back later? I hope so. It's got a microwave and a lantern, a bunch of pillows. It's got a painting, a portrait of a young man that was lost at sea. I mean, that's what I assume it's called. It's definitely called that. There's a metal chair. There's some trunks. Whatever this is, I don't know. And then over here, there's... do not look at my feet. Over here, there was some other stuff. There's an oxygen tank. There used to be... I guess the artist removed it. Yeah, there used to be, in the earlier versions, a trash can with a bunch of stuff in it. And I remember telling the artist, like, look, no one's gonna be looking in the trash can. We are, what is it, like 30,000 meters underwater or something like that? I don't know. We are so far underwater that there should not be a trash can, and there should not be wrappers in the trash can. I don't think that there should be a microwave or a lamp, a lantern. If anything, those would probably be... Is that
a fucking vibrator?
There is not one of those. I assure you, there's not one of those. You should look for the Rapture Room in VR. Ooh. 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 I should write that down. Write that down, write that down. Can someone write that down? Can someone send that to me in like a Discord, in the Discord server? Just like type that, tag me, so I can look later. Okay, well, nobody guessed it, but fruit punch flavor. Hi, Banjo. If there's no garbage can, where'd the bad fishies go? 30,000 leagues? Steph with a steel chair? Yeah, we're going WWE. Is that what they do? And they're all dramatic and stuff? Something like that. And there is the adorable me. I mean, if you want to call me adorable, I guess so. But the puzzle is started, and we are going to continue reading Pride and Prejudice. Put a 1 in chat if you are ready to continue reading. Well, if you're ready for story time. Fruit punch was your next guess. Very good guess. I got distracted by the microwave. I have been using all of these assets since December. So, I mean, be it that it's the end of January, we'll just say 9 months, because like technically 8 months, and plus December. So I have been using all of these assets, hi Noah, for 9 months. And as much as I love all of the materials, I do really like the idea of getting a upgraded model of my VTuber, because this one does have some limitations. And I want to get a new 3D environment. But again, like, that costs money, and we haven't even been using these assets for a year. And honestly, I'm not a big enough VTuber that does it really matter. I would still look the same. It's just like the blend shapes, so the way that my face moves when I talk would be more optimized and realistic. You're looking to get work done, but Steph, you're naturally so beautiful. Yeah, I'm so beautiful, that's why randoms in chat really like to talk about my boobs and my feet. I am so beautiful that they comment on it. Okay, let's read. Let's get away from that topic. I did say boobs. Everyone loves boobs. I don't know anybody who doesn't love boobs. Probably people with too much boobs. Yeah. I'll fall asleep while listening to the story with your sweet voice. Oh, I'm so happy. I cannot wait to help you guys fall asleep or get comfy or just have some peace in your day, okay? So without further ado, sit back, relax, curl up in a burrito blanket, and let me read you to sleep. Or just relax. That's fine. Chapter 36. If Elizabeth, when Mr. Darcy gave her the letter, did not expect it to contain a renewal of his offers, she had formed no expectation at all of its contents. But such as they were, it may well be supposed how eagerly she went through them, and what a contrariety of emotion they excited. Her feelings as she read were scarcely to be defined. With amazement did she first understand that he believed an apology to be in his power, and steadfastly was she persuaded that he could have no explanation to give, which a just sense of shame would not conceal. With a strong prejudice against everything he might say, she began his account of what had happened at Netherfield. She read with eagerness, which hardly left her power of comprehension, and from impatience of knowing what the next sentence might bring, was incapable of attending to the sense of the one before her eyes. His belief of her sister's insensibility she instantly resolved to be false, and his account of the worst objections to the match made her too angry to have any wish of doing him justice. He expressed no regret for what he had done, which satisfied her. His style was not penitent, but haughty. It was all pride and insolence. But when this subject was succeeded by his account of Mr. Wickham, when she read what somewhat clearer attention, a relation of events which, if true, must overthrow every cherished opinion of his worth, and which bore so alarming an affinity to his own history of himself, her feelings were yet more acutely painful and more difficult of definition. Astonishment, apprehension, and even horror oppressed her. She wished to discredit it entirely, repeatedly exclaiming, "This must be false, this cannot be. This must be the grossest falsehood." And when she had gone through the whole letter, though scarcely knowing anything of the last page or two, put it hastily away, protesting that she would not regard it, that she would never look at it again. In this perturbed state of mind, with thoughts that could rest on nothing, she walked on. But it would not do. In half a minute, the letter was unfolded again, and collecting herself as well as she could, she began again the mortifying perusal of all that related to Wickham, and commanded herself so far as to examine the meaning of every sentence. The account of his connection with the Pemberley family was exactly what he had related himself, and the kindness of the late Mr. Darcy, though she had not before known its extent, agreed equally well with his own words. So far each recital confirmed the other. But when she came to the will, the difference was great. What Wickham had said of the living was fresh in her memory, and as she recalled his very words, it was impossible not to feel that there was a gross duplicity on one side or the other. And, for a few moments, she flattered herself that her wishes did not err. But when she read and reread with the closest attention the particulars immediately following of Wickham's resigning all pretensions to the living, of his receiving in lieu so considerable a sum as £3,000, again she was forced to hesitate. She put down the letter, weighed every circumstance with what she meant to be impartiality, deliberated on the probability of each statement, but with little success. On both sides, it was only assertion. Again, she read on, but every line proved more clearly that the affair, which she had believed impossible that any contrivance could so represent as to render Mr. Darcy's conduct in less than infamous, was capable of a turn which must make him entirely blameless throughout the whole. The extravagance and general profligacy Francis, help me. Francis is good with words. How do say this? Is it proflag? It's not proflag. Profligate? Profligacy. That's what that's what Bing says. We all hate Bing. I can't even tell what word you're trying to say. Me either, dude. Me either. Bing says it is profligacy. Anyway, I'm gonna drink water. The extravagance and general profligacy which he scrupled not to lay at Mr. Wickham's charge exceedingly shocked her, the more so as she could bring no proof of its injustice. She had never heard of him before his entrance into the Shire militia, in which he had engaged at the persuasion of a young man who, on meeting him accidentally in town, had there renewed a slight acquaintance. Of his former way of life, nothing had been known in Hertfordshire but what he told himself. As to his real character, had information been in her power, she had never felt a wish of inquiring. His countenance, voice, and manner had established him at once in the possession of every virtue. She tried to recollect some instance of goodness, some distinguished trait of integrity or benevolence that might rescue him from the attacks of Mr. Darcy, or, at least, by the predominance of virtue, atone for the casual errors under which she would endeavour to class what Mr. Darcy had described as the idleness and vice of many years' continuance. But no such recollection befriended her. She could see him instantly before her, in every charm of air and address, but she could remember no more substantial good than the general approbation of the neighbourhood, and the general which his social powers had gained him in the mass. After pausing on this point a considerable while, she once more continued to read. But, alas, the story which followed, of his designs on Miss Darcy, received some confirmation from what had passed between Colonel Fitzwilliam and herself only the morning before, and at last she was referred for the truth of every particular to Colonel Fitzwilliam himself, from whom she had previously received the information of his near concern in all his cousin's affairs, and whose character she had no reason to question. At one time, she had almost resolved on applying to him, but the idea was checked by the awkwardness of the application, and at length wholly banished by the conviction that Mr. Darcy would never have hazarded such a proposal if he had not been well assured of his cousin's corroboration. She perfectly remembered everything that had passed in conversation between Wickham and herself in their first evening at Mr. Phillips. Many of his expressions were still fresh in her memory. She was now struck with the impropriety of such communications to a stranger, and wondered it had escaped her before. She saw the indelicacy of putting herself forward as he had done, and the inconsistency of his professions with his conduct. She remembered that he had boasted of having no fear of seeing Mr. Darcy, that Mr. Darcy might leave the country, but that he should stand his ground. Yet, he had avoided the Netherfield ball that very week. She remembered also that, till the Netherfield family had quitted the country, he had told his story to no one but herself, but that after their removal it had been everywhere discussed, that he had then no reserves, no scruples in sinking Mr. Darcy's character, though he had assured her that respect for the father would always prevent his exposing the son. How differently did everything now appear in which he was concerned. His attentions to Miss King were now the consequence of views solely and hatefully mercenary, and the mediocrity of her fortune proved no longer the moderation of his wishes, but his eagerness to grasp at anything. His behavior to herself could now have had no tolerable motive. He had either been deceived with regard to her fortune, or had been gratifying his vanity by encouraging the preference which she believed she had most incautiously shown. Every lingering struggle in his favor grew fainter and fainter, and in farther justification of Mr. Darcy, she could not but allow that Mr. Bingley, when questioned by Jane, had long ago asserted his blamelessness in the affair. That proud and repulsive were his manners, she had never, in the whole course of their acquaintance, an acquaintance which had latterly brought them much together, and given her a sort of intimacy with his ways, seen anything that betrayed him to be unprincipled or unjust, anything that spoke him of irreligious or immoral habits, that among his own connections he was esteemed and valued, that even Wickham had allowed him to merit as a brother, and that she had often heard him speak so affectionately of his sister as to prove him capable of some amiable feeling. That had his actions been what Mr. Wickham represented, so gross a violation of everything right could hardly have been concealed from the world, and that friendship between a person capable of it and such an amiable man as Mr. Bingley was incomprehensible. She grew absolutely ashamed of herself. Of neither Darcy nor Wickham could she think without feeling she had been blind, partial, prejudiced, absurd. "How despicable I have acted!" she cried. "I, who have prided myself on my discernment, I, who have valued myself on my abilities, who have often disdained the generous candor of my sister, and gratified my vanity in useless and blamable mistrust. how humiliating this discovery. Yet, how just a humiliation. Had I been in love, I could not have been more wretchedly blind. But vanity, not love, has been my folly. Pleased with the preference of one and offended by the neglect of the other on the very beginning of our acquaintance, I have courted prepossession and ignorance, and driven reason away where either were concerned. Till this moment, I never knew myself. From herself to Jane, from Jane to Bingley, her thoughts were in a line which soon brought her recollection that Mr. Darcy's explanation there had appeared very insufficient, and she read it again. Widely different was the effect of a second perusal. How could she deny that credit to his assertions? In one instance, which she had been obliged to give in the other, he declared himself to be totally unsuspicious of her sister's attachment, and she could not help remembering what Charlotte's opinion had always been. Neither could she deny the justice of his description of Jane. She felt that Jane's feelings, though fervent, were little displayed, and that there was a constant complacency in her air and manner not often united with great sensibility. When she came to that part of the letter in which her family were mentioned in terms of such mortifying, yet merited reproach, her sense of shame was severe. The justice of the charge struck her too forcibly for denial, and the circumstances to which he particularly alluded as having passed at the Netherfield ball, and as confirming all his first disapprobation, could not have made a stronger impression on his mind than on hers. The compliment to herself and her sister was not unfelt. It soothed, but it could not console her for the contempt which had thus been self-attracted by the rest of her family. And as she considered that Jane's disappointment had in fact been the work of her nearest relations, and reflected how materially the credit of both must be hurt by such impropriety of conduct, she felt depressed beyond anything she had ever known. After wandering along the lane for 2 hours, giving way to every variety of thought, reconsidering events, determining probabilities, and reconciling with herself, as well as she could, to a change so sudden and so important, fatigue and a recollection of her long absence made her at length return home. And she entered the house with the wish of appearing cheerful as usual, and the resolution of repressing such reflections as must make her unfit for conversation. She was immediately told that the 2 gentlemen from Rosings had each called during her absence, Mr. Darcy for only a few minutes to take leave, but that Colonel Fitzwilliam had been sitting with them at least an hour, hoping for her return, and almost resolving to walk after her till she could be found. Elizabeth could but just affect concern in missing him. She really rejoiced in it. Colonel Fitzwilliam was no longer an object. She could only think of her letter. Chapter 37. The two gentlemen left Rosings the next morning, and Mr. Collins had been waiting near the lodges to make them his parting obeisance. What the hell is this word? I love having to repeat things. Obeisance, close enough. Hi, chatters. Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Chapter 37. The two gentlemen left Rosings the next morning, and Mr. Collins, having been in waiting near the lodges to make them his parting obeisance, was able to bring home the pleasing intelligence of their appearing in good health, and in as tolerable spirits as could be expected, after the melancholy scene so lately gone through at Rosings. To Rosings he then hastened to console Lady Catherine and her daughter, and on his return brought back with great satisfaction a message from her ladyship, importing that she felt herself so dull as to make her very desirous of having them all to dine with her. Elizabeth could not see Lady Catherine without recollecting that, had she chosen it, she might by this time have been presented to her as a future niece, nor could she think without a smile of what her ladyship's indignation would have been. What would she have said? How would she have behaved? Were questions with which she amused herself. Their first subject was the diminution of the Rosings party. "I assure you I felt it exceedingly," said Lady Catherine. "I believe no one feels the loss of friends as much as I do, but I particularly attached to these young men, and know them to be so much attached to me. They were excessively sorry to go, but so they always are. The dear Colonel rallied his spirits tolerably till just at last, but Darcy seemed to feel it most acutely more, I think, than last year. His attachment to Rosings certainly increases." Mr. Collins had a compliment and an allusion to throw in here, which were kindly smiled on by the mother and daughter. Lady Catherine observed, after dinner, that Miss Bennet seemed out of spirits, and immediately accounting for it by herself, by supposing that she did not like to go home again so soon, she added, "But if that is the case, you must write to your mother and beg that you may stay a little longer. Mrs. Collins will be very glad of your company, I am sure." "I am much obliged to your ladyship for your kind invitation," replied Elizabeth, "but it is not in my power to accept it. I must be in town next Saturday." "Why then, at any rate, you will have been here only 6 weeks. I expected you to stay 2 months. I told Mrs. Collins so before you came. There can be no occasion for your going so soon. Mrs. Bennet could certainly spare you for another fortnight." "But my father cannot. He wrote last week to hurry my return." "Oh, your father of course may spare you if your mother can. Daughters are never of so much consequence to a father. And if you will stay another month complete, it will be in my power to take one of you as far as London, for I am going there early in June for a week. And as Dawson does not object to the brooch box, there will be very good room for one of you. And indeed, if the weather should happen to be cool, I should not object to you taking both, as you are neither of you large." You are all kindness, madam, but I believe we must abide by our original plan." Lady Catherine seemed resigned. "Mrs. Collins, you must send a servant with them. You know I always speak my mind, and I cannot bear the idea of 2 young women traveling post by themselves. It is highly improper. You must contrive to send somebody. I have the greatest dislike in the world to that sort of thing. Young women should always be properly guarded and attended according to their situation in life. When my niece Georgiana went to Ramsgate last summer, I made a point of her having 2 men servants go with her. Miss Darcy, the daughter of Mr. Darcy of Pemberley, and Lady Anne could not have appeared with propriety in any different manner. I am excessively attentive to all those things. You must send John with the ladies, Mrs. Collins. I'm glad it occurred to me to mention it, for it would be really discreditable to you to let them go alone." "My uncle has sent a servant for us." "Oh, your uncle? He keeps a manservant, does he? And I am very glad you have somebody who thinks of these things. Where shall you change horses?" "Oh, Bromley, of course. If you mention my name at the bell, you'll be attended to." Lady Catherine had many other questions to ask respecting their journey, and as she did not answer them all herself, attention was necessary, which Elizabeth believed to be lucky for her. For with a mind so occupied, she might have forgotten where she was. Reflection must be reserved for solitary hours. Whenever she was alone, she gave way to it as the greatest relief. And not a day went by without a solitary walk, in which she might indulge in all the delight of unpleasant recollections. Mr. Darcy's letter she was in a fair way of soon knowing by heart. She studied every sentence, and her feelings towards its writer were at times widely different. When she remembered the style of his address, she was still full of indignation. But when she considered how unjustly she had condemned and upbraided him, her anger was turned against herself, and his disappointed feelings became the object of compassion. His attachment excited gratitude, his general character respect. But she could not approve him, nor could she for a moment repent her refusal, or feel the slightest inclination ever to see him again. In her own past behavior, there was a constant source of vexation and regret, and in the unhappy defects of her family, a subject of yet heavier chagrin. They were hopeless of remedy. Her father, contented with laughing at them, would never exert himself to restrain the wild giddiness of his youngest daughters, and her mother, with manners so far from right herself, was entirely insensible of the evil. Elizabeth had frequently united with Jane in an endeavour to check the imprudence of Catherine and Lydia. But while they were supported by their mother's indulgence, what chance could there be of improvement? Catherine, weak-spirited, irritable, and completely under Lydia's guidance, had always been affronted by their advice. And Lydia, self-willed and careless, would scarcely give them a hearing. They were ignorant, idle, and vain. While there was an officer in Meryton, they would flirt with him, and while Meryton was within a walk of Longbourn, they would be going there forever. Anxiety on Jane's behalf was another prevailing concern, and Mr. Darcy's explanation, by restoring Bingley to all her former good opinion, heightened the sense of what Jane had lost. His affection was proved to be most sincere, and his conduct cleared of all blame, unless any could attach to the implicitness of his confidences in his friend. How grievous, then, was the thought that, of a situation so desirable in every respect, so replete with advantage, so promising for happiness, Jane had been deprived by the folly and indecorum of her own family. When, to these recollections, was added the development of Wickham's character, it may be easily believed that the happy spirits which had seldom been depressed before were now so much affected as to make it almost impossible for her to appear tolerably cheerful. Their engagements at Rosings were as frequent during the last week of her stay as they had been at first. The very last evening was spent there, and her ladyship again inquired minutely into the particulars of their journey, gave them directions as to the best method of packing, and was so urgent on the necessity of placing gowns in the only right way that Maria thought herself obliged on her return to undo all the work of the morning and pack her trunk afresh. When they parted, Lady Catherine, with great condescension, wished them a good journey and invited them to come again to Hunsford next year, and Miss de Bourgh exerted herself so far as to curtsy and hold out her hand to both. Chapter 38. On Saturday morning, Elizabeth and Mr. Collins met for breakfast a few minutes before the others appeared. He took the opportunity of paying the parting civilities, which he deemed indispensably necessary. "I know not, Miss Elizabeth," said he, "whether Mrs. Collins has yet expressed her sense of your kindness in coming to us, but I am very certain you will not leave the house without receiving her thanks for it. The favor of your company has been much felt, I assure you. We know how little there is to tempt anyone in our humble abode, our plain manner of living, our small rooms and few domestics, and the little we see of the world. We make Hunsford extremely dull to a young lady like yourself. But I hope you will believe us grateful for the condescension, and that we have done everything in our power to prevent your spending your time unpleasantly." Elizabeth was eager with her thanks and assurances of happiness. She had spent 6 weeks with great enjoyment, and the pleasure of being with Charlotte and the kind of attentions she had received must make her feel the obliged. Mr. Collins was gratified, and with a more smiling solemnity, replied, "It gives me great pleasure to hear that you have passed your time not disagreeably. We have certainly done our best, and most fortunately having it in our power to introduce you to very superior society. And, from our connection with Rosings, the most frequent means of varying the humble home scene, I think we may flatter ourselves that your Hunsford visit cannot have been entirely irksome. Our situation with regard to Lady Catherine's family is indeed the sort of extraordinary advantage and blessing which few can boast. You see on what a footing we are. You see how continually we are engaged there. In truth, I must acknowledge that with all the disadvantages of this humble parsonage, I should not think anyone abiding in it an object of compassion, while they are sharers of our intimacy at Rosings." Words were insufficient for the elevation of his feelings, and he was obliged to walk about the room, while Elizabeth tried to unite civility and truth in a very few short sentences. "You may, in fact, carry a very favourable report of us into Hertfordshire, my dear cousin. I flatter myself, at least, that you will be able to do so. Lady Catherine's great attentions to Mrs. Collins you have been a daily witness of, and altogether I trust it does not appear that your friend has drawn an unfortunate. But on this point it would be as well to be silent. Only let me assure you, my dear Miss Elizabeth, that I can from my heart most cordially wish you an equal felicity in marriage. My dear Charlotte and I have but one mind and one way of thinking. There is in everything a most remarkable resemblance of character and ideas between us. We seem to have been designed for each other." Elizabeth could safely say that it was a great happiness where that was the case, and with equal sincerity could add that she firmly believed and rejoiced in his domestic efforts, his domestic comforts. She was not sorry, however, to have the recital of them interrupted by the lady from whom they sprang. Poor Charlotte! It was melancholy to leave her to such society, but she had chosen it with her eyes open, and though evidently regretting that her visitors were to go, she did not seem to ask for compassion. Her home and her housekeeping, her parish and her poultry, and all their dependent concerns had not yet lost their charms. At length, the chaise arrived. The trunks were fastened on, the parcels placed within, and it was pronounced to be ready. After an affectionate parting between the friends, Elizabeth was attended to the carriage by Mr. Collins, and as they walked down the garden he was commissioning her with his best respects to all her family, not forgetting his thanks for the kindness he had received at Longbourn in the winter, and his compliments to Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner, though unknown. He then handed her in. Maria followed, and the door was on the point of being closed, when he suddenly reminded them, with some consternation, that they had hitherto forgotten to leave any message for the ladies at Rosings. "But," he added, "you will of course wish to have your humble respects delivered to them, with your grateful thanks for their kindness to you while you have been here." Elizabeth made no objection, The door was then allowed to be shut, and the carriage drove off. "Good gracious," cried Maria after a few minutes' silence. "It seems but a day or two since we first came, and yet how many things have happened?" "A great many indeed," said her companion with a sigh. "We have dined 9 times at Rosings, besides drinking tea there twice. How much I shall have to tell," Elizabeth added privately, "and how much I shall have to conceal." Their journey was performed without much conversation or any alarm, and within 4 hours of their leaving Hunsford, they reached Mr. Gardiner's house, where they were to remain a few days. Jane looked well, and Elizabeth had little opportunity of studying her spirits amidst the various engagement which the kindness of her aunt had reserved for them. But Jane was to go home with her, and at Longbourn there would be leisure enough for observation. It was not without an effort, meanwhile, that she could wait even for Longbourn before she told her sister of Mr. Darcy's proposals. To know that she had the power of revealing what would so exceedingly astonish Jane and must at the same time so highly gratify whatever her own vanity she had not yet been able to reason away, was such a temptation to openness as nothing could have conquered but the state of indecision in which she remained as to the extent of what she could communicate, and her fear, if she once entered on the subject, of being hurried into repeating something of Bingley, which might only grieve her sister further. Chapter 39. It was the 2nd week in May, in which the 3 young ladies set out together from Gracechurch Street for the town in Hertfordshire. And as they drew near the appointed inn where Mr. Bennet's carriage was to meet them, they quickly perceived, in token of the coachman's punctuality, both Kitty and Lydia looking out of a dining room upstairs. These 2 girls had been above an hour in the place, happily employed in visiting an opposite milliner, watching the sentinel on guard, and dressing a salad and cucumber. After welcoming their sisters, they triumphantly displayed a table set out with such cold meat as an inn larder usually affords, exclaiming, "Is this not nice? Is not this an agreeable surprise? And we mean to treat you all," added Lydia. "But you must lend us the money, for we have just spent ours at a shop out there." Then, showing their purchases, "Look here, I have bought this bonnet. I do not think it is very pretty, but I thought I might as well buy it as not. I shall pull it to pieces as soon as I get home and see if I can make it up any better." And when her sisters abused it as ugly, she added with perfect unconcern, "Oh, but there were 2 or 3 much uglier in the shop. But when I have bought some prettier coloured satin to trim it with fresh, I think it will be very tolerable. Besides, it will not much signify what one wears this summer, for the shirt have left Meryton, and they are going in a fortnight." "Are they indeed?" cried Elizabeth with the greatest satisfaction. "They are going to be encamped near Brighton, and I do so want Papa to take us there all for summer. It would be such a delicious scheme, and I dare say would hardly cost anything at all. Mama would like to go too, of all things. Only think what a miserable summer else we shall have. Yes, thought Elizabeth. That would be a delightful scheme indeed, and completely do for us at once. Good heaven! Brighton and a whole camp full of soldiers to us, who have been overset already by one poor regiment of militia, and the monthly balls of Meryton. Now I've got some news for you, said Lydia as they sat down at the table. What do you think? It is excellent news, capital news, and about a certain person we all like. Jane and Elizabeth looked at each other, and the waiter was told he need not stay. Lydia laughed and said, that is just like your formality and discretion. You thought the waiter must not hear, as if he cared. I dare say he often hears worse things said than I am going to say. But he is an ugly fellow. I'm glad he's gone. I never saw such a long chin in my life. Well, but now for the news. It is about dear Wickham. Too good for the waiter, is it not? There is no danger of Wickham's marrying Mary King. There's for you. She has gone down to her uncle at Liverpool, gone to stay. Wickham is safe. And Mary King is safe, added Elizabeth. Safe from a connection imprudent as to fortune. She is a great fool for going away if she liked him. But I hope that there is no strong attachment on either side, said Jane. I am sure there is not on his. I will answer for it. He never cared 3 straws about her. What could about such a nasty little freckled thing? Elizabeth was shocked to think that, however incapable of such coarseness of expression herself, the coarseness of the sentiment was little other than her own breast had harbored and fancied liberal. As soon as all had ate, the elder had paid. The carriage was ordered, and after some contrivance, the whole party, with all their boxes, work bags, and parcels, and the unwelcomed addition of Kitty's and Lydia's purchases, were seated in it. How nicely we are all crammed in, cried Lydia. I'm glad I bought my bonnet, if it is only for the fun of having another bandbox. Well, now, let us be quite comfortable and snug and talk and laugh all the way home. And in the first place, let us hear what has happened to you all since you went away. Have you seen any pleasant man? Have you had any flirting? I was in great hopes that one of you would have got a husband before you came back. Jane would be quite an old maid soon, I declare. She is almost 23. Lord, how ashamed I should be of not marrying before 23. My Aunt Phillips wants you. So to get husbands, you can't think. She says Lizzie had better have taken Mr. Collins, but I do not think there would have been any fun in it. Lord, how I should like to be married before any of you, and then I would chaperone you about all the balls. Dear me, we had such a good piece of fun the other day at Colonel Forster's. Kitty and me were to spend the day there, and Mrs. Forster promised to have a little dance in the evening. By the by, Mrs. Forster and me are such friends. And so she asked the 2 Harringtons to come, but Harriet was ill, and so Pen was forced to come by herself. And then, what do you think he did? What do you think we did? We dressed up, Chamberlain, in women's clothes, in purpose, to pass for a lady. Only think of what fun. Not a soul knew of it, but Colonel and Mrs. Forster and Kitty and me, except my aunt, were forced to borrow one of her gowns, and you cannot imagine how well he looked. When Denny and Wickham and Pratt and 2 or 3 more of the men came in, they did not know him in the least. Lord, how I laughed, and so did Mrs. Forster. I think I should have died. And that made the men suspect something, and then they soon found out what was the matter. With such kinds of histories of their parties and good jokes, did Lydia, assisted by Kitty's hints and additions, endeavour to amuse her companions all the way to Longbourn. Elizabeth listened as little as she could, but there was no escaping the frequent mention of Wickham's name. Their reception at home was most kind. Mrs. Bennet rejoiced to see Jane in undiminished beauty, and more than once during dinner did Mr. Bennet say voluntarily to Elizabeth, "I'm glad you are come back, Lizzie." Their party in the dining room was large, for almost all the Lucases came to meet Maria and hear the news, and various were the subjects that occupied them. Lady Lucas was inquiring of Maria after the welfare and poultry of her eldest sister. Mrs. Bennet was doubly engaged, on one hand collecting an account of the present fashions from Jane, who sat some way below her, and on the other, retailing them all to the younger Lucases, and Lydia, in a voice rather louder than any other person's, was enumerating the various pleasures of the morning to anybody who would hear her. "Oh, Mary," said she, "I wish you had gone with us, for we had such fun. As we went along, Kitty and I drew up the blinds and pretended there was nobody in the coach, and I should have gone so all the way if Kitty had not been sick. And we got to George. I do think we behaved very handsomely, for we treated the other 3 with the nicest cold luncheon in the world. And if you would have gone, we would have treated you too. And then when we came away, it was so much fun. I thought we never should have gotten into the coach. I was ready to die of laughter, and then we were so merry all the way home. We talked and laughed so loud that anybody might have heard us 10 miles off." To this, Mary gravely replied, "Far be it from me, my dear sister, to depreciate such pleasures. They would doubtless be congenial with the generality of female minds, but I confess they would have no charms for me. I should infinitely prefer a book." But of this answer Lydia heard not a word. She seldom listened to anybody for more than half a minute, and never attended to Mary at all. In the afternoon, Lydia was urgent with the rest of girls to walk to Meryton, and to see how everybody went on, but Elizabeth steadily opposed the scheme. It should not be said that Miss Bennet's could not be at home half a day before they were in pursuit of the officers. There was another reason too for her opposition. She dreaded seeing Mr. Wickham again, and was resolved to avoid it as long as possible. The comfort to her of the regiment's approaching removal was indeed beyond expression. In a fortnight they were to go, and once gone, she hoped there could be nothing more to plague her on his account. She had not been many hours at home before she found out that the Brighton scheme, of which Lydia had given them a hint at the inn, was under frequent discussion between her parents. Elizabeth saw directly that her father had not the smallest intention of yielding, but his answers were at the same so vague and equivocal that her mother, though often disheartened, had never yet despaired of succeeding at last. We're gonna take a quick pause because I have to run to the bathroom. So we're gonna switch to the Be Right Back screen. And I will be back. Haruken? I'm back, my dear fishies. Hello, welcome TikTok chatters. I gotta fix my hand again. What? That is not. That is not the side of my face. That is not the side of my face either. I hate it here. Why? Why is this so bad? Why is this so bad? That's as close as this is gonna get. Hello, welcome new TikTok chatters. Whatever. Okay. What is Pride and Prejudice even about? Pride and Prejudice is about a romance and a complicated, intricate web of people, pride, prejudice, and society, expectations, and appearances, and I don't know what else. Yeah, romance.
Get up, put your hands up to the sound.
Get down, get your hands up to the sky.
Aw, I had to know more. Thank you, Harlequin. Thank you so much for all the bits. Hi, Zoe. Thank you for joining on YouTube. Yes, we shall continue reading. You're 400 points awake. Just a reminder, if you would like to solve a puzzle while you listen to me read, you can, if you're on Twitch, !puzzle. Or the link is literally pinned at the top of chat. If you are not on Twitch, then I recommend checking out the link on my profile. There is a community puzzle link in there. Chapter 40. Elizabeth's impatience to acquaint Jane with what had happened could no longer be overcome, and at length, resolving to suppress every particular in which her sister was concerned, and preparing her to be surprised, she related to her the next morning the chief of the scene between Mr. Darcy and herself. Miss Bennet's astonishment was soon lessened by the strong sisterly partiality which made any admiration of Elizabeth appear perfectly normal and natural, and all surprise was shortly lost in other feelings. She was sorry that Mr. Darcy should have discovered his sentiments in a manner so little suited to recommend them, but still more was she grieved for the unhappiness which her sister's refusal must have given him. "His being so sure of succeeding was wrong," said she, "and certainly ought not to have appeared. But consider how much it must increase his disappointment. "Indeed," replied Elizabeth, "I'm heartily sorry for him, but he has other feelings, which will probably soon drive away his regard for me. You do not blame me, however, for refusing him?" "Blame you? No." "But you blame me for having spoken so warmly of Wickham?" "No, I do not know that you were wrong in saying what you did. But you will know it when I tell you what happened the very next day." She then spoke of the letter, repeating the whole of its contents as far as they concerned George Wickham. What a stroke was this for poor Jane, who would willingly have gone through the world without believing that so much wickedness existed in the whole race of mankind, as was here collected in one individual. Nor was Darcy's vindication, though grateful to her feelings, capable of consoling her for such discovery. Most earnestly did she labor to prove the probability of error and seek to clear the one without involving the other. "This will not do," said Elizabeth. "You will never be able to make both of them good for anything. Take your choice, but you must be satisfied with only one. There is but such a quantity of merit between them, just enough to make one good sort of man, and of late it has been shifting about pretty much. For my part, I'm inclined to believe it all Darcy's, but you shall do as you choose." It was some time, however, before a smile could be extorted from Jane. "I do not know when I have been more shocked," said she. "Wickham so very bad. It is almost past belief. And poor Mr. Darcy. Dear Lizzie, only consider what he must have suffered. Such a disappointment, and with the understanding, the knowledge of your ill opinion too. and having to relate such a thing of his sister. It is really too distressing. I am sure you must feel it so. Oh, no. My regret and compassion are all done away by seeing you so full of both. I know you will do him such ample justice, but I am growing every moment more unconcerned and indifferent. Your profusion makes me saving, and if you lament over him much longer, my heart will be as light as a feather. Poor Wickham! There is an expression of goodness in his countenance, and openness and gentleness in his manner. There certainly was some great mismanagement in the education of those two men. One has got all the goodness and the other all the appearance of it. I never thought Mr. Darcy so deficient in the appearance of it as you used to. And yet, I meant to be uncommonly clever in taking so decided a dislike to him without any reason. It is such a spur to one's genius, such an opening for wit, to have a dislike of that kind. One may be continually abusive without saying anything just. But one cannot always be laughing at a man without now and then stumbling on something witty. Lizzie, when you first read that letter, I am sure you could not treat the matter as you do now. Indeed, I could not. I was uncomfortable enough, I may say unhappy. And with no one to speak to about it what I felt, no Jane to comfort me and say that I had not been so very weak and vain and nonsensical as I knew I had. Oh, how I wanted you. How unfortunate that you should have used such very strong expressions in speaking of Wickham to Mr. Darcy. For now they do appear wholly undeserved. Certainly, but the misfortune of speaking with bitterness is a most natural consequence of the prejudices I have been encouraging. There is one point on which I want your advice. I want to be told whether I ought or ought not to make our acquaintances in general understand Wickham's character. Miss Bennet paused a little and then replied, Surely there can be no occasion for exposing him so dreadfully. What is your opinion? That it ought not be attempted. Mr. Darcy has not authorized me to make his communication public. On the contrary, every particular relative to his sister was meant to be kept as much as possible to myself, and if I endeavor to undeceive people as to the rest of his conduct, who will believe me? The general prejudice against Mr. Darcy is so violent that it would be the death of half the good people in Meryton to attempt to place him in an amiable light. I am not equal to it. Wickham will soon be gone, and therefore it will not signify to anyone here what he really is. Some time hence, it will all be found out, and then we may laugh at their stupidity in not knowing it before. At present, I will say nothing about it. You are quite right. To have his errors made public might ruin him forever. He is now, perhaps, sorry for what he has done, and anxious to re-establish a character. We must not make him desperate. The tumult of Elizabeth's mind was allayed by this conversation. She had got rid of two of the secrets which had weighed on her for a fortnight, and was certain of a willing listener in Jane whenever she might wish to talk again of either. but there was still something lurking behind, of which prudence forbade the disclosure. She dared not relate the other half of Mr. Darcy's letter, nor explain to her sister how sincerely she had been valued by his friend. Here was knowledge in which no one could partake, and she was sensible that nothing less than a perfect understanding between the parties could justify her in throwing off this last encumbrance of mystery. "And then," said she, "if that very improbable event should ever take place, I shall merely be able to tell what Bingley may tell in a much more agreeable manner himself. The liberty of communication cannot be mine till it has lost all its value." She was now, on being settled at home, at leisure to observe the real state of her sister's spirits. Jane was not happy. She still cherished a tender affection for Bingley. Having never even fancied herself in love before, her regard had all the warmth of first attachment, and, from her age and disposition, greater steadiness than most first attachments often boast, and so fervently did she value his remembrance and prefer him to every other man, that all her good sense and all her attention to the feelings of her friends were requisite to check the indulgence of those regrets which must have been injurious to her own health and their tranquillity. "Well, Lizzie," said Miss Bennet one day, "what is your opinion now of this sad business of Jane's? For my part, I am determined never to speak of it again to anybody. I told my sister Phillips so the other day, but I cannot find out that Jane saw anything of him in London. Well, he is a very undeserving young man, and I do not suppose there is the least chance in the world of her getting to know him now. There is no talk of his coming to Netherfield again in the summer, and I have inquired of everybody too who is likely to know. I do not believe he will ever live at Netherfield any more." "Oh, well, it is just as he chooses. Nobody wants him to come. Though I shall always say he used my daughter extremely ill, and if I was her, I would not have put up with it. Well, my comfort is, I am sure, Jane will die of a broken heart, and then he will be sorry for what he has done." But as Elizabeth could not receive comfort from any such expectation, she made no answer. "Well, Lizzie," continued her mother, soon afterwards, "and so the Collinses live very comfortable, do they? Well, well, I only hope it will last. And what sort of table do they keep? Charlotte is an excellent manager, I dare say. If she is half as sharp as her mother, she is saving enough. There is nothing extravagant in their housekeeping, I dare say." "No, nothing at all." "A great deal of good management depend on it. Yes, yes. They will take care not to outrun their income. They will never be distressed for money. Well, much good may it do them. And so, I suppose, they often talk of having Longbourn when their father is dead. They look upon it as quite their own, I dare say, whenever that happens." "It is a subject which they could not mention before me." "No, it would have been strange if they had. But I make no doubt they often talk of it between themselves. Well, if they can be easy with an estate that is not lawfully their own, so much the better. I should be ashamed of having one that is only entailed to me." Chapter 41. The first week of their return was soon gone. The second began. It was the last of the regiment's stay in Meryton, and all the young ladies in the neighborhood were drooping apace. The dejection was almost universal. The elder Miss Bennets alone were still able to eat, drink, and sleep, and pursue the usual course of their enjoyments. Very frequently were they reproached for this insensibility by Kitty and Lydia, whose own misery was extreme, and who could not comprehend such hard-heartedness in any of the family.
Good heavens! What is it to become of us? What are we to do?
Would they often exclaim in a bitterness of woe.
How can you be smiling so, Lizzie?
Their affectionate mother shared all their grief. She remembered what she had herself endured on a similar occasion 25 years ago.
I'm sure,
said she. I cried for 2 days together when Colonel Miller's regiment went away. I thought I should have a broken heart by now.
I'm sure mine shall break,
said Lydia. If one could but go to Brighton, observed Mrs. Bennet.
Oh, yes, if one could go. But Papa is so disagreeable.
A little sea bathing would set me up forever.
And my Aunt Phillips is sure would do me a great deal of good,
added Kitty. Such were the kind of lamentations resounding perpetually through Longbourn House. Elizabeth tried to be diverted by them, but all sense of pleasure was lost in shame. She felt anew the justice of Mr. Darcy's objections, and never had she been so much disposed to pardon his interference in the views of his friend. But the gloom of Lydia's prospect was shortly cleared away, for she received an invitation from Mrs. Forster, the wife of the colonel of the regiment, to accompany her to Brighton. This invaluable friend was a very young woman, and very lately married. A resemblance in good humour and good spirits had recommended her and Lydia to each other, and out of their 3 months' acquaintance, they had been intimate too. The rapture of Lydia on this occasion, her adoration of Mrs. Forster, the delight of Mrs. Bennet, and the mortification of Kitty are scarcely to be described. Wholly inattentive to her sister's feelings, Lydia flew about the house in restless ecstasy, calling for everyone's congratulations and laughing and talking with more violence than ever, whilst the luckless Kitty continued in the parlour repined at her fate in terms as unreasonable as her accent was peevish.
I cannot see why Mrs. Forster should not ask me as well as Lydia,
said she.
Though I am not her particular friend, I have just as much right to be asked as she has, and more too, for I am 2 years older.
In vain did Elizabeth attempt to make her reasonable, and Jane to make her resigned. As for Elizabeth herself, this invitation was so far from exciting in her the same feelings as in her mother and Lydia, that she considered it as the death warrant of all possibility of common sense for the latter. And detestable as such a step must make her were it known, she could not help secretly advising her father not to let her go. She represented to him all the improprieties of Lydia's general behaviour, the little advantage she could derive from the friendship of such a woman as Mrs. Forster, and the probability of her yet being more imprudent with such a companion at Brighton, where the temptations must be greater than at home. He heard her attentively and then said, "Lydia will never be easy until she has exposed herself in some public place or other, and we can never expect her to do it again with so little expense or inconvenience to her family as under the present circumstances."
"If you were aware," said Elizabeth, "of the very great disadvantage to us all which must arise from the public notice of Lydia's unregarded and imprudent manner, nay, which has already risen from it, I am sure you would judge differently in the affair."
"Already risen?" repeated Mr. Bennet. "What? Has she frightened away some of your lovers? Poor Lizzie. But do not be cast down. Such squeamish youths cannot bear to be connected with a little absurdity not worth a regret. Come, let me see the list of pitiful fellows who have been kept aloof by Lydia's folly."
"Indeed, you are mistaken. I have no such injuries to resent. It is not of particular, but of general evils which I am now complaining. Our importance, our respectability in the world, must be affected by the wild volatility, the assurance and disdain of all restraint which mark Lydia's character. Excuse me, for I must speak plainly. If you, my dear father, will not take the trouble of checking her exuberant spirits, and of teaching her that her present pursuits are not to be the business of her life, she will soon be beyond the reach of amendment. Her character will be fixed, and she will, at 16, be the most determined flirt that ever made herself or her family ridiculous. A flirt, too, in the worst and meanest degree of flirtation, without any attraction beyond youth and a tolerable person, and, from the importance and emptiness of her mind, wholly unable to ward off any portion of that universe contempt which her rage for admiration will excite. In this danger Kitty also is comprehended. She will follow whatever Lydia says, vain, ignorant, idle, and absolutely uncontrolled. Ah, my dear father, can you suppose it possible that they will not be censured and despised wherever they are known, and that their sisters will not be often involved in this disgrace?
Mr. Bennet saw that her whole heart was in the subject, and affectionately, taking her hand, said in reply, "Do not make yourself uneasy, my love. Wherever you and Jane are known, you must be respected and valued, and you will not appear to less advantage for having a couple of, or may I say, 3 very silly sisters. We shall have no peace at Longbourn if Lydia does not go on to Brighton. Let her go then. Colonel Forster is a sensible man, and will keep her out of any real mischief. And she is luckily too poor to be an object of prey to anybody. At Brighton she will be of less importance even as a common flirt, than she has been here. The officers will find women better worth their notice. Let us hope, therefore, that her being there may teach her her own insignificance. At any rate, she cannot grow many degrees worse without authorizing us to lock her up for the rest of her life." With this answer, Elizabeth was forced to be content, but her own opinion continued the same, and she left him disappointed and sorry. It was not in her nature, however, to increase her vexations by dwelling on them. She was confident of having performed her duty,
and to fret over unavoidable evils or augment them by anxiety was no part of her disposition. Had Lydia and her mother known the substance of her conference with her father, their indignation would hardly have found expression in their united volubility. In Lydia's imagination, a visit to Brighton comprised every possibility of earthly happiness. She saw with the creative eye of fancy the streets of that gay bathing place covered with offices. She saw herself the object of attention to tens and scores of them at present unknown. She saw all the glorious of the camp, its tents stretched forth in beauteous uniformity of lines, crowded with the young and the gay, and dazzling with scarlet. And, to complete the view, she saw herself seated beneath a tent, tenderly flirting at least with 6 officers at once. Had she known her sister sought to tear her from such prospects and such realities as these, what would have been her sensations? They could have been understood only by her mother, who might have felt nearly the same. Lydia's going to Brighton was all that consoled her for her melancholy conviction of her husband's never intending to go there himself. But they were entirely ignorant of what had passed, and their raptures continued with little intermission to the very day of Lydia's leaving home. Elizabeth was now to see Mr. Wickham for the last time, having been frequently in company with him since her return. Agitation was pretty well over. The agitations of formal partiality entirely so. She had even learned to detect in the very gentleness which had first delighted her the affectation and a sameness to discuss and weary. In his present behaviour to herself, moreover, she had a fresh source of displeasure, for the inclination he soon testified of renewing those intentions which had marked the early part of their acquaintance could only serve, after what had since passed, to provoke her. She lost all concern for him in finding herself thus selected as the object of such idle and frivolous gallantry, and while she steadily repressed it, could not but feel the reproof contained in his believing that however long, and for whatever cause, his attentions had been withdrawn, her vanity would be gratified, and her preference secured at any time by their renewal. On the very last day of the regiment's remaining at Meryton, he dined with other of the officers at Longbourn, and so little was Elizabeth disposed to part from him in good humour, that on his making some inquiry as to the manner in which her time had passed at Hunsford, she mentioned Colonel Fitzwilliam's and Mr. Darcy's having spent 3 weeks at Rosings, and asked him if he was acquainted with the former. He looked surprised, displeased, alarmed, but with a moment's recollection and a returning smile, replied that he had formerly seen him often, and after observing that he was a very gentlemanlike man, asked her how well she had liked him. Her answer was warmly in his favour. With an air of indifference, he soon afterwards added, "How long did you say he was at Rosings?" "Nearly 3 weeks. "And you saw him frequently?" "Yes, almost every day." His manners are very different from his cousin's.
Yes, very different. But I think Mr. Darcy improves upon acquaintance.
Indeed, cried Mr. Wickham, with a look which did not escape her. And pray, may I ask?
By checking himself, he added, in a gayer tone,
Is it in address that he improves? Has he deigned to add aught of civility to his ordinary style? I dare hope not.
He continued in a lower, more serious tone.
That he is improved in essentials.
Oh, no, said Elizabeth. In essentials, I believe, he is very much what he ever was. While she spoke,
Wickham looked as if scarcely knowing whether to rejoice over her words or to distrust their meaning. There was a something in her countenance which made him listen with an apprehensive and anxious attention, while she added,
When I said that he improved on acquaintance, I did not mean that his mind or his manners were in a state of improvement, but that, from knowing him better, his disposition was better understood.
Wickham's alarm now appeared in a heightened complexion and agitated look.
For a few minutes, he was silent, till, shaking off his embarrassment, he turned to her again and said, in the gentlest of accents,
You, who so well know my feelings toward Mr. Darcy, will readily comprehend how sincere I must rejoice that he is wise enough to assume even the appearance of what is right. His pride in that direction may be of service, if not to himself, to many others, for it must only deter him from such foul misconduct as I have suffered by. I only fear that the sort of cautiousness to you, which you, I imagine, have been alluding, is merely adopted on his visits to his aunt, of whose good opinion and judgment he stands much in awe. His fear of her has always operated, I know, when they were together, and a good deal is to be imputed to his wish of forwarding the match with Miss de Bourgh, which I am certain he has very much at heart.
Elizabeth could not repress a smile at this, but she answered only with a slight inclination of the head. She saw what he wanted. She saw that he wanted to engage her on the old subject of his grievances, and she was in no humor to indulge him. The rest of the evening passed with the appearance, on his side, of cheerfulness.
Wow.
The rest of the evening passed with the appearance, on his side, of usual cheerfulness, but with no further attempt to distinguish side.
Okay. I'm gonna redo the entire paragraph because I keep messing up. Oh, God. Oh man, my back hurts too. Elizabeth could not repress a smile at this, but she answered only by a slight inclination of the head. She saw that he wanted to engage her on the old subject of his grievances, and she was in no humor to indulge him. The rest of the evening passed with the appearance, on his side, of usual cheerfulness, but with no further attempt to distinguish Elizabeth. And they parted at last with mutual civility, and possibly a mutual desire of never meeting again. When the party broke up, Lydia returned with Mrs. Forster to Meryton, from whence they were to set out early the next morning. The separation between her and her family was rather noisy than pathetic. Kitty was the only one who shed tears, but she did not weep from vexation and envy. Mrs. Bennet was diffuse in her good wishes for the felicity of her daughter, and impressive in her injunctions that she should not miss the opportunity of enjoying herself as much as possible. Advice which there was every reason to believe would be well attended to. And in the clamorous happiness of Lydia herself in bidding farewell, a more gentle adieus of her sisters were uttered without being heard. Chapter 42. Had Elizabeth's opinion been all drawn from her own family, she could not have formed a very pleasing opinion of conjugal felicity or domestic comfort. Her father, captivated by youth and beauty, and that appearance of good humor which youth and beauty generally give, had married a woman whose weak understanding and illiberal mind had very early in their marriage put an end to all real affection for her. Respect, esteem, and confidence had vanished forever, and all his views of domestic happiness were overthrown. But Mr. Bennet was not of a disposition to seek comfort from the disappointment which his own imprudence had brought on, in any of those pleasures which too often console the unfortunate for their folly or their vice. He was fond of the country and of books, and from these tastes had arisen his principal enjoyments. To his wife, he was very little otherwise indebted than as her ignorance and folly had contributed to his amusement. This is not the sort of happiness which a man would in general wish to owe to his wife. But where other powers of entertainment are wanting, a true philosopher will derive benefit from such as are given. Elizabeth, however, had never been blind to the impropriety of her father's behavior as a husband. She had always seen it with pain, but respecting his abilities and grateful for his affectionate treatment of herself, she endeavored to forget what she could not overlook, and to banish from her thoughts that continual breach of conjugal obligation and decorum, which, in exposing his wife to the contempt of her own children, were so highly reprehensible. But she had never felt so strongly as now the disadvantages which must attend the children of so unsuitable a marriage, nor ever been so fully aware of the evils arising from so ill-judged a direction of talents. Talents, which, rightly used, might at least have preserved the respectability of his daughters, even if incapable of enlarging the mind of his wife. When Elizabeth had rejoiced over Wickham's departure, she found little other cause for satisfaction in the loss of the regiment. Their parties abroad were less varied than before, and at home she had a mother and sister whose constant repinings at the dullness of everything around them threw a real gloom over their domestic circle. And though Kitty might in time regain her natural degree of sense, since the disturbers of her brain were removed, her other sister, from whose disposition greater evil might be apprehended, was likely to be hardened in all her folly and assurance by a situation of such double danger as a watering place and a camp. Upon the whole, therefore, she found, what has been sometimes found before, that an event to which she had been looking with impatient desire did not, in taking place, bring all the satisfaction she had promised herself. It was consequently necessary to name some other period for the commencement of actual felicity, and to have some other point on which her wishes and hopes might be fixed. And by again enjoying the pleasure of anticipation, console herself for the present, and prepare for another disappointment. Her tour to the lakes was now the object of her happiest thoughts. It was her best consolation for all the uncomfortable hours which the discontentedness of her mother and Kitty made inevitable. And could she have included Jane in the scheme, every part would have been perfect. But it is fortunate, thought she, that I have something to wish for. Were the whole arrangement complete, my disappointment would be certain. But here, by carrying with me one ceaseless source of regret in my sister's absence, I may reasonably hope to have all my expectations of pleasure realized. A scheme of which every part promises delight can never be successful, and general disappointment is only warded off by the defense of some little peculiar vexation. When Lydia went away, she promised to write very often and very minutely to her mother and Kitty, but her letters were always long expected and always very short. Those to her mother contained little else than that they were just returned from the library, where such and such officers had attended them, and where she had seen such beautiful ornaments as made her quite wild, that she had a new gown or a new parasol, which she would have described more fully, but was obliged to leave off in a violent hurry as Mrs. Forster called her, and they were going off to the camp. And from her correspondence with her sister, there was still less to be learnt, for her letters to Kitty, though rather longer, were much too full of lines under the words to be made public. After the first fortnight or 3 weeks of her absence, health, good humour, and cheerfulness began to reappear at Longbourn. Everything wore a happier aspect. The families who had been in town for the winter came back again, and summer finery and summer engagements arose. Mrs. Bennet was restored to her usual querulous serenity, and by the middle of June, Kitty was so much recovered as to be able to enter Meryton without tears, an event of such happy promise as to make Elizabeth hope that by the following Christmas she might be so tolerably reasonable as not to mention an officer above once a day. Unless, by some cruel and malicious arrangement at the War Office, another regiment should be quartered in Meryton. The time fixed for the beginning of their northern tour was now fast approaching, and a fortnight only was wanting of it, when a letter arrived from Mrs. Gardiner, which at once delayed its commencement and curtailed its extent. Mr. Gardiner would be prevented by business from setting out till a fortnight later in July, and must be in London again within a month, and as that left too short a period for them to go so far, and see so much as they proposed, or at least to see it with the leisure and comfort they had built on, they were obliged to give up the lakes, and substitute a more contracted tour, and, according to the present plan, were to go no farther northwards than Derbyshire. In that county, there was enough to be seen to occupy the chief of their 3 weeks, and to Mrs. Gardiner it had a peculiarly strong attraction. The town where she had formerly passed some years of her life, and where they were now to spend a few days, was probably as great an object of her curiosity as all the celebrated beauties of Matlock, Chatsworth, Dovedale, or the Peak. Elizabeth was excessively disappointed. She had set her heart on seeing the lakes, and still thought there might have been time enough, but it was her business to be satisfied, and certainly her temper to be happy, and all was soon right again. With the mention of Derbyshire, there were many ideas connected. It was impossible for her to see the word without thinking of Pemberley and its owner. "But surely," said she, "I may enter his county with impunity, and rob it of a few petrified spars without his perceiving me." The period of expectation was now doubled. 4 weeks were to pass away before her uncle and aunt's arrival. But they did pass away, and Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner, with their 4 children, did at length appear at Longbourn. The children, 2 girls of 6 and 8 years old, and 2 younger boys, who were left under the particular care of their cousin Jane, who was the general favourite, and whose steady sense and sweetness of temper exactly adapted her for attending to them in every way, teaching them, playing with them, loving them. The Gardiners stayed only 1 night at Longbourn, and set off the next morning with Elizabeth in pursuit of novelty and amusement. One enjoyment was certain, that the suitableness of companions, a suitableness which comprehended health and temper to bear inconveniences, cheerfulness to enhance every pleasure, and affection and intelligence which might supply it among themselves if there were disappointments abroad. It was not the object of this work to give a description of Derbyshire, nor of any of the remarkable places through which their route thither lay: Oxford, Blenheim, Warwick, Kenilworth, Birmingham, etc., were sufficiently known. A small part of Derbyshire is all the present concern. To the little town of Lambton, the scene of Mrs. Gardiner's former residence, and where she had lately learned some acquaintances still remained, they bent their steps, after having seen all the principal wonders of the country, and within 5 miles of Lambton, Elizabeth found from her aunt that Pemberley was situated. It was not in their direct road, nor more than a mile or 2 out of it. In talking over their route the evening before, Mrs. Gardiner expressed an inclination to see that place, the place, again. Mr. Gardiner declared his willingness, and Elizabeth was applied to for her approbation. "My love, should you not like to see a place of which you have heard so much?" asked her aunt. "A place, too, with which so many of your acquaintances are connected. Wickham passed all his youth there, you know." Elizabeth was distressed. She felt that she had no business at Pemberley, and was obliged to assume a disinclination for seeing it. She must own that she was tired of seeing great houses. After going over so many, she really had no pleasure in fine carpets or satin curtains. Mrs. Gardiner abused her stupidity. "If it were merely a fine house richly furnished," said she, "I should not care about it myself, but the grounds are beautiful. They have some of the finest woods in the country." Elizabeth said no more. But her mind could not acquiesce. The possibility of meeting Mr. Darcy while viewing the place instantly occurred. It would be dreadful. She blushed at the very idea. And thought it would be better to speak openly to her aunt than to run such a risk. But against this, there were objections, and she finally resolved that it could be the last resort, if her private inquiries to the absence of the family were unfavorably answered. Accordingly, when she retired at night, she asked the chambermaid whether Pemberley were not a very fine place, what was the name of its proprietor, and with no little alarm, whether the family were down for summer. A most welcome negative followed the last question, and her alarms were now being removed. She was at leisure to feel great deal of curiosity to see the house herself. And when the subject was revived the next morning, and she was again applied to, she could readily answer, and with a proper air of indifference, that she had not really any dislike to the scheme. To Pemberley, therefore, they were to go. That, my dear fishies, is where we are going to stop reading for today, because according to this next chapter, it would take 40 minutes for me to read this next chapter. Also, I did see the hydrates in chat, so no worries, I did drink my water. Big stretch, chat, big stretch. We are currently 62% of the way through the book. So I think we're making some great progress. Also, if you haven't seen on YouTube, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. But if you haven't seen on YouTube, all of Ender's Game has been uploaded. Rock! Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for 4 whole months. Thank you, thank you. Talking about yesterday, yes. We've had a couple of book streamers, booktubers, book readers, raid in, and we get to share the love with other book readers. But what I was saying is that all of my narration of Ender's Game is uploaded on YouTube. I'm currently working to upload, For Her Sake. The very first part was uploaded yesterday. You can expect the next video to be uploaded on Saturday. And I am currently working to edit all of the I-rated... Oh, you're talking about Vexing Cat last night? Yes. I've rated many a reading streamer. Hi, Mr. Apple. It's good to see you. Bongo Cat. But anyway, and I'm currently working on editing my narration of Pride and Prejudice so that I can begin to upload that to YouTube. But yeah, if you guys ever miss my live streams, maybe you don't catch the live stream, maybe you're all caught up on the live streams, or maybe you're not a fan of all of the talking and stuff that streamers do to chat, totally normal, I get it. You can check out the YouTube videos. Those are edited to cut out all of like the talking in between stuff and some of the mistakes. And the sound alerts, I edit out any of the alerts that happen during the reading. I have to ask, what are those oval jewels on your VTuber's outfit? Yes, so the jewels, I don't remember where they came from. It's pretty nice you picked up face tracking. Oh, I've always had the face tracking. It's optimized over time. Earlier I had mentioned that I would love to get an upgraded model, which seems ridiculous because I've literally only been using this for 9 months. But that with an upgraded model that is made custom from scratch, the blend shape and the facial tracking would function a little bit more naturally. This model is made in Vroid Studio, meaning that it does have quite a bit of limitations. It's amazing and I love it, and the artist is like a gift from God. But the program itself has limitations. I think it's more expressive compared to a few months ago. Yes, absolutely. Especially the mouth movements. The mouth movements are a combination of my iPhone tracking my face and my microphone adapting my mouth to the sounds that it hears. Hi, Rockcore. So, I can actually kind of show this in a little bit of a test. Let me go into this. Okay, so I have turned off lip sync. So now if I look away from the microphone,
my lips will not move. If I, here we go. I can just do this. So you see that my lips are not moving at all. Now it's tracking my face. So I have to actually enunciate the words happening on my lips. Like that. It's getting new upgrades. Yeah, it'd be new upgrades. Okay, and then there's this. So if I set it to the default weight, which is pretty big, the default weight, set it to that. What is that set to? I gotta zoom in. I'm not wearing my glasses. I normally set these settings pretty low because not all of them are accurate. Okay. So now you can see with a combination of both the lip sync and my lips moving, my mouth will never fully close. So I usually turn that very, very low. I'll set that back to default. Because when you make an sound, you don't want to open your mouth. So it thinks an M sound is eh. Yep. So I've done a lot of optimization to make sure that it looks somewhat decent. I'm gonna turn that back down to, I think I had it at 50. Yeah, there we go. The double buns is cute. I love them. They're adorable. So are you guys. Hi, Adrian. And the tech is really cool, and I do. Hi, Forrest Gavin Reeds. Hi, it's good to see you. I do. There we go. I do really like to go over the tech and stuff, so I always welcome people asking about how is this done, what is the program, stuff like that. I can see a ponytail with this model. Pigtails would be nice too. With instead of the buns, doing like little pigtails. I don't know. I purposefully chose the buns because they're really fun to have. It was M-lips. Lip syncing. So the microphone is listening to the words that are coming out of my mouth, and it is doing a hybrid of tracking. So it's tracking my lips and it's listening to my words, and it's trying to put those two together so that it gets close to humanly realistic. Isn't everyone tracking your lips? Nope, just you, Shattered. Just you. Well, my dearest fishies, is time for me to
escape. Yes, you know how it is. Streams are normally 2 hours, so I did go over a little bit. I do need to take an Epsom salt bath and like get some minerals in my body. Of course. Thank you guys so much for being here. And thank you so much for listening to me read to you, even when it's thundering outside. I wasn't gonna wait for the storm to leave in order to continue reading, so unfortunately in the recording, there's gonna be some thunder playing in the background. And for sticking with me even when, you know, I have to pause to take drinks, or when I'm making all kinds of mistakes in my reading, or I don't know how to pronounce certain words. And just a reminder, I will be back again tomorrow night, Friday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time Zone, and we will continue reading Pride and Prejudice, starting from chapter 43. So we are 60% of the way through the book. Now, let's see if I know anybody that is reading that we can raid out to. Oh, well, I know one person. Mwahahaha. I always love this one person. We've been to Dewey a few times. Have we been to Dearly You recently? I guess not super recently. So I've got 3 options. We could go say hi to Dewey. Dewey just started their stream 8 minutes ago. We could go to Dearly You. They started their stream 38 minutes ago. Or we could go crash Cass's party. And Cass has been live for 4 hours and 38 minutes. Hi, Dawn. It's good to see you. Where would you guys like to go? And don't be upsetty spaghetti. we do have to go. We do have to end stream at some point. You can't tell me to stay. You can't bully me into staying. To whomever floats your boat, maybe the lowest viewer stream. I like that. Given, I'm pretty sure all 3 of them get double, triple, or even quadruple, centuple my viewership. But we'll join Dewey because they just recently started their stream. And now Dewey does ASMR. So it is not book reading, but it is ASMR, and they do quite a bit of chatting. They are a lovely individual. We've been to them a few times before, so you know that I recommend them if we're raiding into them. And this is the part where we say our goodnights, our goodbyes, and our see you tomorrows. I will be back again tomorrow night, Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time Zone, to continue reading Pride and Prejudice. As I said, we will resume chapter 43. We are 62% of the way through the book. If you have not gotten to catch up on previous chapters, highly recommend watching the Twitch VODs or the YouTube VODs. They are saved in both places. If you do not want to listen to Pride and Prejudice, I highly recommend and encourage you to check out my YouTube channel. I have so many other videos and readings available for you, and if you miss listening to the VODs, you can quite literally review the VODs all the way back to December if you would like to listen to some of the OG reading. Now with that, if you are watching on Twitch, please do copy the raid message, and we are going to raid into Dewey. Please behave yourself and be a good representation of the community, because your behavior reflects on me as well, and you must please be good. If you are not watching on YouTube, the stream will just end for you, but if you'd like to get notified of when I will next be live, highly recommend you go to Twitch and you get the link to Discord so you can get notified. Join the Discord server, get notified whenever I go live. Without further ado, I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking. And please have a good day tomorrow. Drink water, eat food, touch some grass, get some sunlight. Tell the people around you that you are grateful for them, that you love them. Be kind to others, be kind to yourself, and have a great night.